Hello. Hey everybody. This is just a quick check-in. Texture techniques. Drawing a concept image from a thumbnail, scaled it up, started drawing on it. Did this in class, but I wanted to follow up on something important, a key aspect of this whole process. So I know what this looks like. It's kind of like it's sketchy, it's rough, it's beautiful, and it's got some lighting and touches. But here, this big thing. The big thing is the highlights is what I want to talk about right at the moment. This is obviously still just sort of like a loose sketch, right? But what it's doing for us in our texture technique process. Hold on. Quiet, Lily, quiet. That's my dog. So what it's doing for us in the texture technique process here is that you have the ability to work out details in concept before you move it over and try in 3D. And the problem with doing it in 3D is it takes a lot longer usually to do any of this stuff in 3D. There's always a movement between. Um, so you're making it first of all, and you all know how that can be with making something in 3D. And 3D tends to inhibit your free flow, right? Like you can do free flow 3D, but really it's not so great. You need it planned out. Otherwise, you waste a lot of time doing a lot of stuff you don't necessarily want and doesn't work. And that's going to happen anyway, but this reduces that. Is having a solid idea of what it is you're trying to create, right? Now, the other aspect here is that um, you tend to take the once you're done with 3D, you UV it, and so you got to lay out the UV. So you got to basically um, skin the thing like it's some kind of like clothing pattern or pelt or something. It's called pelting, right? And then you got to take it and jump it over to some software. In this case, we'll probably use just Photoshop here, but you can take it over to Substance. You can take it other places. You can take it into Maya, actually, or ZBrush, sorry. Take it over to ZBrush, and you can do painting literally on your model while you're doing sculpting work, both or either. And then you finally get done with that, and you bring it back in, and you place the image into a shader that then applies over your model. So now you're dealing with shaders. And then to see it properly, you're going to still want lighting. You're still going to want to set up lighting. So a 3D scene is an entire process. Um, More akin to building a TV set or a theater stage or something like that, than it is to just drawing. Like I'm drawing and I can just do it right now. So I can look at it and I can say, I want these highlight points. I want them in here. I want this level of detail. This is sort of the bevel. Lily, quiet. What do I want up here? Well, I want like some kind of runic setup going on so I can just see how that will look. And I can make a new layer and I can detail it, right? And I'll know. And it doesn't take that long. And I wanted to point out that in this 3D, this SketchUp, now this requires you can draw some. So I understand that that's a hindrance. But even if you draw poorly, you can note and map out things. We've learned Photoshop. You can bring in some text. You can do a rough sketch. You could bring in pictures. Bring in pictures into Photoshop. Just put them in here. I did right here, but I'm using mine as a texture build. But you could just use yours as reference and make notes like, you know, cool door, right? Steps, down, steps, right? You can build all that up and composite, and it's still faster than doing it in 3D to get that end result. So why are we doing thumbnails and so much drawing? Well, I want you to have at least the basic fundamentals so you can work with this and do some things with it and work in Photoshop, right? So that being said, that's why it's worth it to do things like this. Now, second thing I want to say is that that was a big one, but the second thing I want to say is don't underestimate the use of a hard highlight or a black line work. So I'm just using black line, white highlight, and I'm just using the dumb brush. Kyle's Happy HB, right? And it's very small, so it's coming across as a tiny little line. And I am just using, now this is where that whole, hey, have you been practicing your sketch flow, your single shot line? Because I'm just going to go in here and go lines, right? And I'm just using them. And I press and I lighten and I press. But the thing about this, even if you don't care so much or you don't quite nail down this technique, the thing I want you to keep in mind is that this is an important aspect to hand drawing on textures. At least I think so. Shh, Lily, quiet. Um, like when you go in and when you paint up textures, even if you take photos of things in your textures, it's really well worth it to get the feel of highlighting and dark shadowing little bits here and there, because to you want that how do I put it? I'm sorry, I'm thinking while I draw. I really want to get this part up here. I'm trying to be very light on it. There we go. That feels good. And let me get this part here. My brain entered a little bit of drawing mode. Yeah. So what was I saying? I was saying, you want to feel those edges. So, like my little piece down here, let's go on and take a look at it over here. It's a smart layer, so I'm going to open it up as a smart layer. And this is what it is, right? So this is my texture. Okay, and that's fine, except for what you want to also be considering. If this is the texture that I'm going to apply onto a model somewhere in 3D in Maya, right? And I just make this so it repeats. We're going to talk about making them repeating, and you can actually get them that are repeating on textures.com, but it's also good to know the skill set. It has to do with basically utilizing your offset filter here and all the tweaks in Photoshop to really even out. We'll talk more about that, but what I want to point out is that because it lines up with the sketch work, you should consider hitting the highlights of edges on textures because it makes them pop a little bit more, right? You can already see that they exist here. You can see them here, but I'm going to enhance those. I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to push it more. Because what this does is it really pops these edges then, and it'll help all of your shaders pop a little bit more, and it's fun, and it's pretty, and it just works well. So I like to do this, but this is not always a requirement. There's other ways you can do this, but this is just one technique I'm kind of pointing out. And so if you're like, why do I work so much? Well, I can do these things here on these textures, right? And then I could maybe even use this as a texture. Now I'd probably take this and turn it into like a screen or a linear, or maybe even just an overlay, right? And the point here will be that I can kind of tone it down and blend it in. It's more blended, you know what I'm saying? Another way you could go about doing this is you could always take this and duplicate this. And you could, if you're like, I don't want to do that though, you could take the dodge tool and you could set it for highlights, and you could come in here and just let it soak up the highlights. Lily, quiet. Like this, right? And then you can do it like that. This is a little more mechanical, technical, but it's probably faster, to be honest. Right. It is pretty fast, and I do like it. And then you can always go in with the burn tool and get the shadows to deepen. Right? And this is going to make things pop a little bit more. Now, if you get really skilled and you're like, I'm going to get all extra up on this, you could always go with duplicate layer. And I'm just doing that so I can mess with the layer. And let's add well, let's see if we can do it this way. Levels, curves, brightness, contrast. I usually don't like brightness contrast, but let's play with it. Where'd you go? Contrast? Let's try a little bit of levels. Oh man. Probably not going to get out of levels, to be honest. Yeah, we're not gonna get out of levels. I think the burn tool is your best bet, to be honest. The burn and um, burn and dodge. Yeah, the burn and dodge. Because I don't think we're gonna get what we want out of this. Curves, maybe. Mm. That's kind of cool. Right. Looking pretty good. And then me being kind of a madman, I probably go back in and do these highlights anyway, on top of those adjustments. Let's go ahead and amp that up. Is that 50? But we don't have to watch me do this. And this is why it takes me so long to get things done. I should just be using those pretty little highlight systems. Let's call this one, actually, this one's going to be useless because I really like these, so I'm just going to delete it. I don't need it anymore. Okay, so this is just going to be my base. Base, highlights. But really, the only problem with doing the dodge and okay, so the only problem with doing, I will say, the only problem with doing the dodge and the burn tool is that it's on the layer, and you don't have any control over that then. Like, once you place it, it's there. Like, I can't make more adjustments, right, with my, my layer. So the reason not to do it would be you have more control over a layer individually like this. And that's both good and bad. Always good and bad. Alright, so this, now I'm thinking, is getting to be viable, and I'll place it in my scene once I get things ready. I love these little chips. Finding edges and stuff is kind of satisfying. So I'm just sort of flowing with those edges. And this is more what I'm talking about when you come in and you do something where you're like, hey, line control, or look at my short strokes, like this, not good, not good. But this, that's good. That's good. We can use this. This. See? And I'm using it because I'm using it to help me trim along with my textures, which is, again, this is a little bit of an old school sort of style. Because shaders will handle a lot of this for you these days. But I just don't want to make, I mean, otherwise you're painting the rocks. You're probably just going into the ZBrush and painting all these rocks. I'm just doing it through texture usage, you know? And it's looking pretty good. It's coming along. There's an appeal here that I think is still valid. You definitely add your own sense of artistic style in while you're doing these then, and a little bit of the human factor shows through, because you could do a lot of this through like sort of just a procedural, or if I took it in a ZBrush, I would probably just have an alpha brush that looked like these stones, and I would just press it into the clay of the model, and then come back over with and futz around with the technical aspect of having a normal map, which I'm still going to have, by the way. I'm still going to do that normal map process here. I'm just going to finish up with these first, and that's another thing is having control. So if I come in here and I go, okay, this baby's ready for a normal map, I'll talk about that more later. That's a whole other thing. Now let's not get there. This is just supposed to be a little quick something. I'm just in here showing you that you can create these sort of, see here you go, highlights. I'm just adding an accent to it to give it a little more appeal. And as you'll notice, that's sort of the same thing that I've done over here as I've gone through, and I've done a light setup where I do that as well over here. And that's all. That's all we're doing. We're just making our vision become 3D reality, right? And we're just laying down how that vision will come to fruition, right? And that's all the concept is. Now, it's not going to look exactly like this, but I can take elements of it and move it over into my 3D, right? So, anyway, there's how I do sort of that, some of that painting and texture work. Even when it's a photo, I like to do a little bit of hand paint work on it. And, you know, there's places where you might want to deepen aspects of the texture, right? So that's what, then you just come in with the black ink, do the same thing, right? It's looking pretty good. I'm liking it. I think I only really need the highlights. But just out of curiosity, let's say save now. Save this baby up. Oh. Can't save this document back to its original file format, flatten layers, and discard. Yeah, that's right. It's not. Hold on. Let me flatten the image. It's a smart. I've been playing on the smart. Let's flatten the image. Save. And if we go back, I'm going to have a lot of highlights on here now. But it is a smart layer. Let's undo that. This is now becoming a real. I'm just going to save as now on my computer and just do. Oh, what's that here? No. Here we go. I have no idea. I'll just save it in classes for now. Let's save it under wall project. Yeah. Well, that's your student's wall project. I'll just save it right here. Or can I save it to a smart place to save it? It's always under your Maya files, projects. I should probably make like an open scene here, but it's part of the courtyard wall now, and so I'm going to put it under source images, and we'll call this the basin stonework with highlight. I'll save it there for now, and hopefully come back for it later. And no. Alright, and that's that. So I've got it saved away for now, and I can come back to it and find it and put it where it needs to go later. I probably should organize my Maya folder a little so I can make more of a stonework. Like here's textures, and then make a texture pack. And I'll mess around with that later. Okay, everyone.